Online gambling sites like these can be linked to money laundering and organized crime due to the lack of regulation. Over the years, the Pacific nation of Palau, where online gambling is illegal, has been a home to such illicit gambling operations. This is an actual hotel where in 2020, 15 individuals from China were arrested and about $80,000 was seized. During those raids at multiple hotels, hundreds of Chinese nationals were arrested, charged with promoting illegal gambling. Now, Palau says enough is enough. What exactly are the links between those operations and China? How has China been targeting Palau? And why is this Pacific island critical to securing Taiwan? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. Joining us today from Miami is Cleo Paskal, Foundation for Defense of Democracies Senior Fellow. Thank you very much for joining us so late in Miami. And in the studio, Raymond Sung, Prospect Foundation Vice President, and Liou To-hai, National Chengchi University College of International Affairs Adjunct Distinguished Professor. A very warm welcome to both of you in the show and also Cleo online. Now, after years of Chinese influence campaigns and the weaponization of tourism, Palau is hitting back with a campaign to expel Chinese criminals and tighten visa restrictions. Previously, Palau rarely denied visas, but in 2025, of the 80 immigration visa applications from China, 65 were denied. Of the 41 from Japan, 0 were denied, and of the 124 from the Philippines, 15 were denied. Of the 24 non-resident worker permits applied from China, 23 were denied. Of the 22 from the Philippines, 2 were denied. Of the high-profile deportations, all were Chinese. There was gambling pin Wang Shuiming, listed on an Interpol red notice and later arrested in Montenegro, and also Carrie Yan and Gina Zhou, who were convicted of attempting to set up a, quote, country within a country in the Marshall Islands. Cleo, if I could come to you first, before we get into the broader context. Now, the Interpol red notice was actually served by Beijing. Now, you've written that this illegal Chinese activity in Palau is linked to Beijing. So explain this. Why would Beijing be hauling in their guy and registering him on the Interpol database?
Well, he must have taken money from somebody who is particularly well connected, because that's really kind of the only justification. This is a case of the dog that didn't bark. What about all of the other major Chinese crime activity that has been going on in Palau? For example, Broken Tooth was operating out of Palau, and there was no Interpol notice on him, even though he's a convicted criminal in China, who is then allowed to leave China and pursue all sorts of activities in other locations, including Palau. So I think that the one that they decided to go after shows that China does have the ability to go after these bad actors, but chooses not to in many, many other cases. One can only assume because it's not hurting the Chinese Communist Party and may in fact be helping in it achieving its goals.
Right. And how does that work? What's the relationship between these criminal gangs and the CCP's goals?
So when you look at, for example, Broken Tooth activities, what happens with illegal gambling is you inject money into the system. That involves potentially, and I'm not saying this is the case with him, but we've seen it with others, bribing officials. Those officials then start to become closer, pulled into Beijing's orbit. The ultimate goal, of course, is to get this country to ditch its recognition of Taiwan and ultimately to drop its defense relationship, among others, with the United States. So the goal is to inject this corruption into the body politic, reaching into the deep levels of the political system in order to achieve those strategic goals. And we can also see it just in terms of physical infrastructure. People who are said to be linked to that sort of activity have leased land very close to strategic sites, including U.S. military sites in Palau. That land usage doesn't make any economic sense, but it does make a lot of strategic sense. So you can see kind of across the board usage of illegal activity that combines with seemingly legitimate commercial activity to achieve strategic goals.
Raymond, let's move to the visa denials. We showed some of those figures. You know, how big a move is this that the Palau government has undertaken?
I think the Palau government found that the spreading of the criminal activity, illicit and activities, including covering criminal activities and sale of drugs and online gambling. So, it seems to be behind it. It's a particular group, especially with the Chinese nationality links. So that out of the effort of combating illicit activities, that the Palau government issued this initiative to check about the entry visas holding by the seemingly tourists or workers permit. So that's what the result shows, that it shows that there seems to be a program behind it to exploit the criminal connections to sink into Palau society. Alongside with that, we see other extension of Chinese malign influence, including economic weaponizing the tourism, and also about bribing politically to try to influence the strategic calculations made by the Palau government.
Professor Liu, what does it say about Palau and the security or even sovereignty concerns that they have?
Yeah, I think it has been going on for a while. So finally, I think Palau government decided to do something about it because they cannot put up with this anymore. Palau actually is known for luxurious tourist destination. That is why it's linked with Beijing. Those rich people, and gambling. So rich people can go there, not the poor. So rich people can go there. And then they have set up this hotel and this kind of illegal activities, gamblings. Then, of course, the money laundering is another. Could be relevant to political motivation as well, as two of our guests have already illustrated. As a result, Palau finally decided to deny the visa, no matter it's migrant visa or tourist visa, because both visas obviously have been abused by those illegal people.
Cleo, just want to bring you back in. I mean, you've done a lot of research about this visa denial program, the directive from the government. Did you want to talk a little bit more about it?
Sure. It's so there was an election recently in November in Palau. The incumbent president was reelected, President Whips. And in December, he issued a presidential directive that gave the National Security Coordinator oversight over these visa issues, because one of the problems that they had was the problem was, just as was just mentioned, kind of getting overwhelming, and their Attorney General's office was overtaxed. There were issues with immigration. There were also issues, when a country starts to get corrupted by this, the mechanisms start to break down. So even police officers from Palau were arrested for bringing drugs into the country. So they needed to really do something drastic. And what they did was give the National Security Coordinator, working in conjunction with the Attorney General and others in the administration, the right to take a look at all of the visas that were being issued, and including the extensions. And it was a 3-month program. And it was during those 3 months that they made those denials that you talked about. And they also broke up several new suspected gambling rings and deported those as well. And as a result of their courage, because going up against Chinese organized crime is not easy. And this is a country of less than 18,000 people that recognizes Taiwan and has a relationship with the US. So you can imagine the amount of pressure put on the individuals in Palau involved. Palau deserves an enormous amount of credit, I think, for being at the forefront of dealing with an issue that countries all over the world are facing. And they're doing it in part with help from Taiwan. Some of the forensics done on the electronics that have been seized, there's been help from Taiwan on that, and that's really bolstered their ability to defend themselves.
Now, located about 800 kilometers east of the Philippines, Palau occupies a highly strategic position between Guam and Taiwan. It serves as a key node in the U.S. military's second island chain. Palau maintains diplomatic ties with Taiwan and holds a compact of free association with the U.S., which guarantees the island's nation's security in return for exclusive American military access to Palauan territory. In December 2024, Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te visited Palau and called the country a brother. In April, Palauan President Surango Whips Jr. pledged unwavering support for Taiwan, vowing to maintain ties until death. It's a sentiment he has repeated over the course of his presidency. He said, "We do know that China has one goal, and that is for us to renounce Taiwan. That decision is a sovereign decision, and no country tells us who we should be friends with." I guess we kind of believe in that principle that when you're married until death do us part. Raymond, let me come to you. So, in your view, what is the basis of this very strong relationship?
Of course, the diplomatic relations between Taiwan and Palau goes a long way. So the historical roots and friendship are there. And also the tangible assistance rendered by Taiwan quite generally to the Palau is also being well received in Palau. Of course, we see that in our president, the first after his inauguration, the first overseas trip is to the Pacific Islands, and including Palau. Then the Taiwan opened up its center for distant medical center for Palau, which is essential for that population scattered around the islands. And also over the years, including agricultural, medical, healthcare, and also to tackle climate change, also about assistance in the technology to detect illegal fishings. Taiwan has done a lot to help Palau. So it's based on friendship, it's based on shared values, based on shared strategic goals, also on tangible assistance rendered by Taiwan.
What I want to add is the education is another important part, because Taiwan's semiconductor, AI, medical science, many other things. We can make a lot of contribution for Palau if the students come to Taiwan and learn quite a lot. And then, of course, tourism is another very important industry for two of us to work together.
Cleo, just bringing you back in. So we heard what the president had said in April, and he had said that China has one goal, to make Palau renounce Taiwan. Why does it want this so much?
If you don't have a Chinese embassy in a country, that gives you a layer of protection, because the Chinese embassies can operate like forward operating locations for espionage and influence operations. So Palau, because it doesn't have a Chinese embassy, that gives it a layer of protection. Also, it does have a close relationship with the U.S. And for example, there's an over-the-horizon radar installation that's being built on one of the islands. And if there is an attack on Taiwan, God forbid, then Palau would probably be hit just before that in order to be able to disable U.S. abilities to see what's going on. And that's something that's worth bearing in mind. Often, I think people in Taiwan don't understand how these countries, especially a country like Palau, they're knowingly putting their lives on the line for democracy and freedom for all of the peoples of the Pacific, including the people of Taiwan.
Raymond, did you want to respond to that? It's Taiwanese do need to know that this is happening, that support is there.
Yeah, I think strategically Palau occupy a key position, especially in the light of the forward posturing of the Indo-Pacific forces of the United States to maintain the open, free order of the Indo-Pacific. And of course, Guam is in the key strategic position, which is of U.S. And shadowing Guam is the free associated states, including Palau. And if you take historical lessons as an example, actually before the attack of the Japanese Empire, before the World War II, of Hawaii, actually Japan control and being present in the Micronesia. So you see the strategic positioning when if you want to have some military presence, the land and islands scattered around those areas is crucially important.
Right. And Professor Liu, we don't think it's likely for various reasons, but if it were to happen, I mean, this is what China wants. What's the potential for China to break through that second island chain if Palau became China's orbit?
So if Palau is being occupied or establish formal diplomatic relations with China, that means disrupt this first island, second island chain, connect together in order to deter the China's military activities against the United States or the region. So that is why this is very important. That is also why U.S. Secretary of Defense Hagel mentioned about now U.S.'s primary task in this region is to deter China. So that is why also U.S. has already reinforced its presence in Palau, because it's a strategically important position.
Right, okay. Now, Cleo, Palau is seen as a calm and effective example of essentially a small nation standing up to a big power. To what extent do you think it could serve as a model for the other freely associated states, Marshall Islands, FSM?
Not just the other freely associated states, all of us. I mean, I'm sitting in Miami, and there are a lot of efforts going on in the U.S. around immigration and things, but I don't see the sort of focused assessment yet that Palau has done. I mean, what they've accomplished percentage-wise is really remarkable. They focused on the bad actors that were, and we're focusing now on the Chinese. There are others as well who weren't from China, but mostly it was people who had come over from China to create problems in their country. And it just shows that it can be done. And it can show the same is true for Caribbean countries, Latin American countries, African countries. It takes incredible courage and focus and knowledge about what's going on. Frankly, it gives hope, but it also puts them in the crosshairs. It puts them in the firing line. So this is the time when they need as much help as they can get. Go swim in their beautiful waters, help their economy, bolster their assessments. Do what you can, because they're fighting on the front lines of the political warfare battle for a free and open Indo-Pacific like nobody else is.
And in terms of that possible retaliation by China, if you could just cover off some of what they've done so far in terms of weaponizing tourism in Palau.
So there was a very concerted effort, reached its high water mark in around 2016, 2017 to build up the tourism sector. They went from practically no tourists coming from China to a very, very high percentage of tourists coming from China. And along with it, there were a lot of developments, leasing of land. And then it was very quickly pulled out. And the threat was basically, if you don't derecognize Taiwan, the tourists aren't coming back. And it threw the economy into chaos. To the credit, again, of the brave people of Palau, they didn't bow to that sort of economic pressure, blackmail, if you want to call it. And then COVID came, and so that sort of allowed a couple of years for them to rethink the whole infrastructure around tourism anyway. And they have definitely not prioritized getting back the tourists from China. But you're starting to see, especially before the last election, you started to see the charter flights coming from places like Macau again. So China, those influence operations from China don't want to let go. They're going to keep coming and coming and coming. They only have to get it right once, and they're going to keep trying. And hopefully, the people of Palau will maintain their will and hold the line.
Okay, let's now go to the security infrastructure in Palau. Peleliu Airfield is a historic World War II site in Palau. It was the location of one of the most savage conflicts, the Pacific War's so-called forgotten battle. The fighting to secure U.S. General Douglas MacArthur's left flank and push towards the Philippines was supposed to last a few days, but extended to almost 3 months. Last year, the airfield was reopened after decades of disuse, following extensive rehabilitation by the U.S. military. It's one of a string of efforts to reinforce the U.S.'s second island chain defense strategy. Also underway in Palau is the installation of a long-range early warning system called TACMAR and the upgrade of Malacao Wharf to enable larger vessels and container handling capability. Raymond, the Palau defense architecture is also part of what the U.S. calls its lily pad strategy.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what's the goal of that?
The goal is to disperse the U.S. military presence scattered and forward, trying to maintain the presence and maintain quick responses and to really complement the capabilities with each other. So, for example, we now see that aside from what you mentioned, the military installations in Palau, also the U.S. maintained an army base in Marshall Islands and also has a ballistic missile testing base in the Micronesia. And also, of course, we see that northwards Guam and in Okinawa and Japan. So that's the Indo-Pacific capabilities planning. And of course, the Defense Secretary has said it should be forward-leaning and it should be quickly response to the possible the biggest incident is to taking over of Taiwan by force. So that's the general planning of the U.S. military presence.
And Professor Liu, if you can tell us, why are these particular projects important? The over-the-horizon radar, the airfield, and the port or the wharf.
Yes, because early warning system. So that is why it can detect the Chinese vessels and of course fighters if they approaching the region. Just recently China already sent its 055 destroyers to close to Tasman Sea. So that means that they can send these destroyers and possible submarine and also fighters from the destroyers. So in that case, U.S. has to be well prepared in case it's approaching, and then you can attack them in advance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Cleo, bringing you back in. So we went back into history to the Battle of Palau. Can you explain to us how strategic Palau was in World War II and why it still is today?
Yes, well, the strategic importance of Palau in World War II is actually hotly debated, but the idea was, because the Palau is just the other side of the Philippines, so as you were saying about protecting the flank, and the thought was Palau would need to be secured if for the Philippines offensive to be successful. That's actually debated, but not now. Now the as was very well stated with the first and second island chain issue, imagine if you've got a Chinese base set up on the other side of the Philippines and you can squeeze the Philippines from both sides. The Philippines has a very serious problem. Additionally, that TACMAR site is going up on the island of Angar. There was also a very horrible World War II battle on Angar. You can see Palau from Angar. That's how close they are. And as mentioned, there's Chinese interests that have already bought a substantial piece of land on Angar. Angar is small. It has 100, 150 people on it, but a section of the port is under a lease to Chinese interests. And this raises this whole issue of, the U.S. is focusing very much on the kinetic battlefield, whereas the Chinese Communist Party is focusing on the political warfare battlefield. And if you build up these sites, but you don't secure the political environment around you, then it can be disabled before it can even be put into play. And that becomes a very serious strategic problem as you're putting together any strategy, including the lily pad strategy.
So what sort of measures do you believe should be taken out now?
So Palau is showing the way. Go after the strategic corruption. Nothing else will work until you can get rid of the strategic corruption, because at the central level of governance, you're going to see distortion of decision making. For example, there was a thought about putting a Patriot battery in to protect the Takmor site. But the Senate in Palau has issued basically the previous Senate a complaint about it, saying they didn't want it. There are concerns that some people in the Senate, many are great, good, honest people, and some there are some serious concerns about them. And so until you get rid of the corruption, until the honest people have a chance to breathe and to defend themselves and their democracies, you're going to have a real problem. Like Solomon Islands, for example, the vast majority of people in the last election voted to get rid of this pro-Beijing government that's just been destroying their economy and their society. But because of corruption, even though they voted in a new set of people, that new set of people was corrupted very quickly. So you have to go after the money flows, seize bank accounts and assets in Australia and New Zealand, start sanctioning people, just change the cost-benefit analysis of taking corrupt money coming from Beijing.
We're going to have to end it there. I'm sorry, we've run out of time. Thank you so much, Cleo Paskal in Miami, and also my guests in the studio, Raymond Sung and Liou To-hai, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.